Hubbard saw. It's all consistent. Has the witness been offered or received any money, preferred treatment, or other benefit in order to get the witness to testify? No. We heard nothing of that. Nothing. Had any pressure or threat been used against the witness that affected the truth of the witness's testimony? No. We heard nothing of that. Did the witness at some other time make a statement that is inconsistent with the testimony he or she gave in court? Not really, no. They weren't handed a deposition transcript and said, didn't you say this a couple of years ago? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So when you're viewing the state's evidence, use these rules. When you're thinking about the state's witnesses, use these rules. Importantly, as we heard, as I talked about, as we have all talked about, my burden in this case, I have to prove this case to you. It is my job and my job alone to prove this case. My burden is a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. That is my burden. Just like we talked about in jury selection. If it's wet outside and we heard thunder and it's wet for miles and miles and miles, it is reasonable to believe that it rained. It is not reasonable. We have to imagine, speculate, force ourselves. Pretend that a fire truck came and sprayed it for miles and miles and miles. That doesn't happen. A reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the defendant may arise from the evidence, conflict of the evidence, or lack thereof evidence. And that's a really important point. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, as the judge read, as you have in your hand, second-degree murder, and we talked about this in a little bit during jury selection. What do I actually have to prove? What are the elements of second-degree murder? Number one, Pedro Jimenez is dead. Number two, the death was caused by the criminal act of Daisy Link. And number three, there was an unlawful killing of Pedro Jimenez by an act imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a deprived mind without regard for human life. An act includes a series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose. An act is imminently dangerous and demonstrating a deprived mind if it is an act or series of acts that a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another, is done will from ill will, hatred, spite, or evil intent, and is of such a nature that the act itself indicates an indifference to human life. And importantly, I do not have to prove intent that she wanted to kill him that night. If it meets those three elements in order to convict of a second-degree murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove the defendant had the intent to cause death. Merely these three elements. So let's talk about these three elements and how the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt these three elements. The first, as you heard, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there is a stipulation in this case. Pedro Jimenez is dead. There is no disagreement there. And you must take that as true. So, the state has proven, beyond a reasonable doubt, the first element. We're a third of the way there already. 2 and 3, the death was caused by the criminal act of Daisy Link, and there was an unlawful killing of Pedro Jimenez by an act imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a deprived mind without regard for human life. I'm going to take these two together. I think it's important to talk about these two together. And importantly, we should talk about the timeline in this case. There was a lot of testimony about what the timeline is, when they found a gun, when they didn't find a gun, when Daisy admitted to the crime. The timeline is really important. June 25th at 3:06 a.m., a Ring video starts recording. At 3:11, a gunshot is heard. Daisy tells Pedro, "It's not like I hit a major artery, you'll be fine." Couple beats. "You sure you don't want to go to a hospital?" "No, okay." No fear, no adrenaline like she testified to, nothing. Calm as a cucumber. Pay attention closely to the right-hand side. You actually see Pedro fleeing. cavalier attitude, anger, hatred, pissed off as hell. Not adrenaline, calm. And what's important about this too, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I want to take a moment and discuss Pedro's statement before she shoots. Do it, I want to die. I gave you everything. That is a man who is broken by his wife of 9 years. It is not him charging at her. It is not him screaming at her. This isn't an assisted suicide. This is, you're pointing a gun at me. Nobody says, do it, I want to die, while there's a gun below you, hanging off the side. This is a man who has a gun in his face, steps away from this defendant. Do it then, do it! I want to die! I gave you everything. You broke my heart. You just told me you're cheating on me. This is a toxic relationship with domestic violence going back and forth. And you know what Miss Link did? She lit a match and lit that fire that night because she wanted this relationship to grow, and this was the best way to do it. This was a broken man. Maybe a drug addict, never home, not really seeing his kids all that much. A broken man. He just found out that his wife was confirming his suspicions the entire time. 3:21, 10 minutes pass. Daisy Link calls 911 and lies about who he is, who she is, and everything else.
Today, June 25, 2022, 03:21 and 57 seconds.
Miami-Dade fire. What is the emergency?
Hi. Yeah. I don't know. I can hear a guy screaming in the house and there's blood everywhere.
Okay, down on my way. I can track your phone to see where you were.
Okay.
Do you know what happened to him?
I have no idea. He's bleeding everywhere.
Is he awake and breathing? And looks like you're at 1300 18 Highway, down on my way.
Where?
Are you in Homestead now?
Yes, I'm Homestead.
Down on my way. What is the phone number you're calling from?
786 562 9539.
7656-9539. So then you get Homestead Police on the line as well. Fire is already in route.
Lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. 3:27, 6 minutes. 6 minutes after she calls 911, Officer Nicholson arrives first on scene, and she lies to him. And what does she say to Pedro, despite knowing exactly what happened?
Pedro, what the fuck happened?
Pedro, what the fuck happened? She knows. She shot him. She pointed the gun at him and discharged it as he ran away. What the fuck happened, Pedro? I shot you is what the fuck happened.
I'm in the alleyway.
Officer Nicholson asked, Pedro, what happened? And she says, if you listen closely, I hit a major artery. Listen to it carefully. This is his body worn camera. She says, I hit a major artery. That's an admission, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. She shot and fired. And it links up directly to her statement earlier, where she mocked him. It's not like I hit a major artery. She knew what she was doing. She was aiming that gun on purpose. This is not a ricochet. It didn't hit the ground and bounce up. She shot it at him as he fled. And we actually see Pedro Jimenez's last breaths ever. We watch him die.
Where's that?
They're coming.
his last moments on earth. His wife pretends she didn't know that she murdered him. The victim pronounced deceased at 3:40 a.m. Officer Rodriguez speaks to the defendant, who again lies to him. He left in a van. I don't know who his friends are, despite going there earlier in the day and picking him up. The van that officers wasted precious time searching for. She sent them on a wild goose chase. Later on, homicide detectives arrive. 5:40. 6:30. Daisy's sister shows up and says, well, if he's dead, Daisy did it. She knew. She knew. Because she knew that it was a toxic relationship. She knew that Daisy hit Pedro and Pedro hit Daisy. That Daisy was going to light a match eventually. She knew. Between 6:50 and 8:30, detective crews canvasses the scene of Pedro's murder. They walk the scene, they take photographs, they try to figure out piece by piece what's going on. They don't find a gun. At 9:20 a.m. is when the defendant enters the interview room. And watch how aggressive she is.
All right, then you can your friend that raised your pictures. That's you. What was your sister gave me? For you? She gave me some shorts and a jacket.
I'm not putting that shit.
Well, we're
Covered
gonna
in
take
blood.
that close. You're gonna have to
Angry.
put clothes on.
Why would you guys,
She's full of blood. Why do you want to keep clothes on with blood? Okay, we're gonna take off the shirt. And then you can put this jacket on. If there's no blood on the shorts, then I gotta see, but I don't want you to eat blood. Can we stand over there so I can take the pictures, please?
I'm not putting that shit on. She even goes on to say, at 3:52, in that hour and a half video that you have in evidence, why are you treating me like I did this? Why are you taking pictures of me like I did it to him? She says at 4:08, the bruises are from a car accident, which she confirmed, by the way, on the stand when I was cross-examining her yesterday. She says the bruises don't apply to this, trying to make it seem like he would hit me. Lie after lie after lie after lie. At 12:27, canines locate a firearm. Oh, I'm sorry. At 12:27, a residential search warrant is executed for Daisy and Pedro's home. And what do they find, ladies and gentlemen? Look closely. Men's shoes, men's clothing, adult men's clothing. Pedro lived there. It was his home. Same time, canines locate a hidden firearm. Hidden firearm. That was about the only honest thing she said that night, that she hid that gun. And it was her gun. And it's not until 3:39 and 4:20 that the defendant begins her interview. And we know that, not just because we heard it and we can see it on video, but the time of when she waived her Miranda rights and chose to speak to officers is actually memorialized on that Miranda form itself. Do it. You have the right to remain silent. You don't have to talk to me if you do not wish to. You don't have to answer any of my questions. Do you understand that right? Yes. Should you talk to me? Anything which you say may be introduced into evidence against you. Do you understand? Yes. If you want a lawyer to be present during questioning at this time or any time hereafter, you are entitled to have a lawyer present. Do you understand this? Yes. If you cannot afford to pay for a lawyer, one will be provided for you at no cost if you want one. Do you understand that right? Yes. And then she waives. She voluntarily spoke to them. And she says a lot of very interesting things during this statement. But I think what's most interesting here is her demeanor during this. She's crying, she's sad, she's scared. until she's confronted with one of her lies. And you can actually see her demeanor change.
Wait, what if I tell you that you're lying right now?
Say your bullshit.
She's not scared anymore. She's mad. You see her demeanor change when officers catch her in a lie. What if I have you on video saying, it's not like I hit a major artery, you'll be fine? Her change in demeanor is important here. What else does she tell us?
Yeah, I was angry.
I was angry. Doesn't say I was scared. Not talking about something that happened 5 days ago. I was angry. What does she say about the shooting? One of the 5 different stories she tells that night, and yesterday as well.
Just like my hand. Okay, it was down, and then once he said, oh, you're gonna sleep outside tonight, bitch, that's when I literally just lifted it up and I just cocked it, and I shot it. It was already cocked and everything. I shot it.
You catch that? It was already cocked. He says, you're sleeping outside. I lifted it and I shot. It was already cocked. She was outside, not scared. Her with the deadly weapon. We know Pedro never had the gun. We know he never had a weapon. She said as much. At 5:03 is when she tells officers where the firearm is. 5 hours prior, though, K-9 already had located it. She wasn't being helpful. They already found it. They were already piecing the picture together. As she's being interviewed, they're doing their work. They find this ring camera footage. They find the firearm. They're doing their job. They're watching video. The defendant is eventually arrested that day, and then on June 26, a secondary canvass is conducted with other K-9 officers, and they don't find anything. They don't find the casing that Daisy Link hid, because she didn't want to get caught. We also know, based off the subsequent search, Pedro's path that night. Well, let's talk about this. We heard not from 1, not from 2, not from 3, but 4 officers about that video footage at Robert Cisneros' house. We heard from Robert Cisneros himself. It's an older model DVR. It's plugged in, it's hardwired. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the victim running, hiding behind bushes, running and then collapsing. A woman passing by, going to his body, manipulating his body, walking away, coming back. We actually can piece together his path based off the evidence. The CSI photos, the blood spatter. We know that Daisy's house is where he got shot. I'm sorry, Daisy's house. This is the porch. And what's important is those 2 doors. She says that he was charging at her while she was on the porch. I don't know where, I don't know how, but that's what she tells us. And after he gets shot, he runs this way. And we know that from the blood spatter. And Daisy walks this way. You'll be fine. Not like I hit a major artery. You'll be fine. And he continues running. And we actually see that in that same video. And blood spatter continues. And we know, again, that he travels up through the alley until he gets to this car. Blood spatter again, before collapsing and dying. Right here. And look at where the Chevy Trax is. Look how far away it is. Daisy would have had to have walked feet after feet after feet to get to him and hide his stuff back in the car. It took her time. It was deliberate action she was taking because she didn't want to get caught. And we can also piece together Daisy's path that night as well. This is their home. She shoots and fires as he's running away from her. And she goes this way, by the trampoline. She says, not like I hit a major artery, you'll be fine. Beat You sure you don't want to go to the hospital? Ah, you'll be fine, okay. And then she comes back and she hides the firearm, her firearm. She has to come back, get in her car, and drive. And she waits. She doesn't call 911. It was just a gunshot. She knows she hit him. She doesn't think she hit him where she hit him, but she knows she hit him. And so she goes to look for her husband of 9 years. She's not afraid of him. She's not scared of him. She's not thinking about an incident that occurred 5 days prior. This is a toxic relationship, and she just lit the fuse. I cheated on you. You're right. You're never home. And so she says, my husband of 9 years, I just shot. Let me go find him. Because you can't take back a murder. Her rendering aid, attempting to render aid, line officers. Line officers are relevant. Rendering aid is irrelevant. You can't take back a murder. And she goes this way and up and back. We know she doesn't go this way. There's a car blocking it. We know it's not this way because her car ends up over here. And it's important. She goes this way, up, and she walks over to Pedro's body, turns her car off, and takes his items out of his pocket. His phone, his money, his keys. She goes back and then starts rendering aid. It took her time. These are deliberate steps that she took. The shot itself. He was running away. It went through his foot, out through his ankle, and then through his thigh. In, out, in, out. It was a clean shot. It was a good shot. The only way that shot makes sense with one shot, from what we heard from Dr. Mathis, is when somebody is running away. That's the trajectory that it took. That is the only way that that is possible. And if it missed the foot, it's still going through the thigh either way. It's still hitting that artery either way. This didn't bounce off the floor through his foot, ricocheting, and then ending up in her thigh, or his thigh. It was a good shot. Again, we can see Dr. Mathis's work. Entry, exit, through the femoral artery. And how do we know that it was Daisy's gun? Pay attention. Pay very close attention. Earlier in the day, minutes after the shot, what's in her hand? The firearm she hid. She got that gun. It was her gun. And how do we know it's her gun? Well, we heard from criminalists from the Miami-Dade crime lab that they tested it for DNA. And the majority of that DNA belonged to none other than the defendant, Daisy Link. And how do we know that? The statistic they came up with. 1 in 28.71 septillion that it is her DNA. Septillion, that's 24 zeros. That's not a small number. The population of Earth is 8 billion. That's 24 zeros. It's her gun. Let's talk about reasonable doubt again. And this is so important because I'm about to talk about the defense witnesses. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. A reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the evidence of the defendant may arise from the evidence, conflicts of evidence, or lack thereof. And so what's important here, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's actually no reasonable doubt for the state's evidence. But when you look at conflicts of the evidence, you should also take a look at the evidence that the defense presented. And to be clear, they don't have to do a single thing. Her attorney never has to open his mouth. I'm the only one that has to do anything. But they gave us interesting evidence, interesting testimony. And you should weigh that evidence, that testimony, the same way you weigh the state's evidence. Did the witness seem to have an opportunity to see and know the things about which the witness testified to? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We heard from her niece, Laylin, who lives in Texas, who flew to Florida 4 days prior. And what did she do? Well, I went to my aunt Crystal's house and we hung out, and then there was a barbecue a couple days later, and I saw some injuries to Daisy, but I can't tell you where those injuries are from. I don't know what day it was taken. I wasn't there the night that he was killed. I wasn't there when he got shot. She wasn't there. We heard from Crystal, same thing. Same thing. And she even admitted she didn't know if Pedro lived there or not. Crystal pretended like she knew. Excuse me, Laylin pretended like she knew, but she was challenged on it. You're not coming in to Florida often. You live in Texas, you don't know. It's entirely reasonable to believe that when Pedro comes home, your aunt's not telling you, hey, my husband's home. She has no idea. Her mother testified as well. She left. They said it was such a dangerous situation, she left her grandchildren with such a dangerous man. She watched her daughter get choked, nearly murdered in front of her, and she leaves? It's one thing to say, I can't control this 30-year-old person. If they want to do what they want to do, they're going to do it. It's an entirely different thing, though, to leave an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old in that situation. Because it didn't happen. Did the witness seem to have an accurate memory? No. Crystal denied making a statement to Detective Morales, but then challenged. She goes, well, actually, I don't remember. They're confrontational. I think Crystal even said, how would I know? I'm not a psychic. Did the witness seem honest and straightforward in answering the questions? Absolutely not. Same thing. Crystal said, I'm not a psychic. How would I know? Well, it's your sister, right? Shouldn't you know about her abusive husband? You know about the toxic relationship. You know she hits him and he hits her. But you're not a psychic? You can't put one and one together? You know your sister has a gun. I just showed you it's her gun. Did the witness have some interest in how the case should be decided? Does the witness testimony agree with the other testimony and other evidence in this case? Has the witness been offered or received any money for fear treatment or other benefit in order to get the witness to testify? Had any pressure or threat been used against the witness that affected the truth of the witness's testimony? Let's talk about Pedro Jr. for a second, and his testimony being so critical. What did he tell us? I'm here to get my mom out of jail. I'm here to get my mom out of jail. I live with my grandma. I talk to her once a week at least about this case. I make mistakes. I forget sometimes. And what happens? Grandma corrects me. Sometimes I say, Daddy shot twice 5 days before. But no, Grandma, who wasn't there, mind you, corrects me. If they're willing to coach a child on what to say, it is very reasonable to believe that they have been coordinating their testimony too. They weren't there, they don't know. And a child has admitted. Children are pretty honest. And honestly, Pedro Jr. seems like a great kid. Really honest. And said, when I make a mistake about the night, that my grandma wasn't there. She tells me what happened. She wasn't there. How does she know? Did the witness at some other time make a statement that is inconsistent with the testimony he or she gave in court? Absolutely. How many times did they get impeached with their own depositions? Let's talk about the lease agreement. Now this is an older one. And I want to bring to your attention 3 major things here. Tenant's email address, p89.pj@gmail.com. 2 phone numbers. Top right, my copy. My copy, not original. not a stamp, not a filed one, my copy. And then right here, where it says Daisy Link, pay very close attention to this line. What does that look like? That looks like whiteout. My copy. And if you make it out, you can actually kind of see Pedro Jimenez's name right underneath it. But that's consistent with being whited out on her copy, not the original, her copy. Let's talk about the newest lease as well, Defense Exhibit D. Well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Pedro's name's not on here. But you know what's also not on here? Any signatures? How do we know this wasn't updated? There's no initialing, there is no signatures, no dates and times. How do we know? Let's talk about earlier in the night. They say that this was such a toxic family, such an evil man. Oh, I'm sorry, actually, let me back up. Daisy said he was a good guy. That's what she said, he was a good guy. Not the family, though. They came to rescue her, but they waited 4 days. They were there, they were having a barbecue. They flew in the middle of the night. They left their grandchildren at home, watching that. Earlier in that day, after Daisy picked Pedro up, on her own volition, mind you, Pedro holding a beer. Who shows up? His children, her children, their family. They are a family. No fear, not being scared, they are a family. Even later, the victim returns to the car. Probably left some stuff in it. After all, he rented that vehicle. Who walks back to the apartment? Pedro and Daisy. I showed you this a few minutes ago, but pay attention to what's in Daisy's hand. Gun. That same gun. Her gun. Daisy told us an interesting lie yesterday, and her mother did too. That was completely refuted by actual evidence. They said that Pedro punched through a wall and opened this door. Well, good thing we have photographs. Tell me where the broken window is. Even if he punched through that, look, I'm not the biggest guy in the world. I don't believe in superheroes. I don't think Pedro is Mr. Elastic. He can't open that door from there. There's no broken window. There's no punch window. That didn't happen either. Lie after lie after lie after lie. Another really important thing. Let's talk about what happened 5 days prior. I believe something happened. Hell, we have pictures. I absolutely believe something happened. But not what Daisy said. Not what Pedro Jr., who was coached on what to say. How do we know that? Well, Daisy actually told us. She has cameras. They record things. That would have happened on or about the 20th or 21st. And what's really interesting here is the conveniences. It is really convenient. We have the 18th. We have the 22nd. And then the night of the murder. This is from her phone. Isn't it convenient how that video doesn't exist? Isn't it convenient? What actually happened that night, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? What actually happened that night?
I was mad as fuck.
That's what happened. She was mad as fuck. Pedro's never home. He's on the road all the time. He's off getting high. I was mad as fuck. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt the death was caused by the criminal act of Daisy Link. She pointed the gun. It was already pointed at him when he made those statements. And he fled and he ran and she fired. She actually made a very surprising admission yesterday when she said that she didn't think she was going to hit him. She pointed and fired with purpose. She said yesterday, it was contradicted by her own statement, which is full of its own contradictions over and over and over again. I didn't think I was going to hit him. Say it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt, element 2. Element 3, there was an unlawful killing of Pedro Jimenez by an act imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a deprived mind without regard for human life. Pointing a firearm and shooting it is imminently dangerous. Deprived mind, I don't know what's more deprived than after you shot someone, mocking them. You'll be fine. Not like I hit a major artery, you'll be fine. After breaking this man's heart and lighting that fuse. Let's talk about lesser included offenses. Well, let me back up. After the state has proven element 1, element 2, and element 3, the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of second-degree murder. As you heard, there are lesser included offenses in this case. Lesser included offenses are offenses that make up the actual charge, but they're smaller. There's less there. And as you heard, in this case, it's manslaughter. What do we have to prove for manslaughter? That Pedro Jimenez is dead. That, we all agree on. You have to take that as true. We all agree. And 2, Daisy Link intentionally committed an act or acts that caused the death of Pedro Jimenez. She lifted the gun, she pulled the trigger as he ran. That is an act and caused the death. We heard Dr. Mathis say, cause of death, manner of death, homicide, gunshot wound. Daisy Link did that. I've already proven to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that this is a second-degree murder. But I've also proven manslaughter as well. Aggravation of a felony by carrying a firearm. This is important too because you will have a verdict form that you will have to make certain decisions on. If I've proven my case, you must make the determination beyond a reasonable doubt. Daisy Link actually possessed the firearm during the commission of the crime. She's admitted that. Whether the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Daisy Link discharged the firearm, she's admitted that. Whether the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Daisy Link discharged the firearm and doing so caused death or great bodily harm to Pedro Jimenez. He's dead. Proven that. This is really important too. Justifiable use of deadly force. Self-defense. That's what this case is. That's the defense that they have put on. The defendant was justified in using deadly force if she reasonably believed that such force was necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to herself or another, or the imminent commission of a burglary to a dwelling or false imprisonment against herself. I'm not going to talk about those because there's no evidence of those. But let's talk about imminent for a second. I had a conversation with Mr. Cruz during jury selection. I threatened him, remember? We were at Publix in the line. I cut him, he said some words to me. I said, I'll see you outside. I lifted my shirt, I showed him my gun. Imminent, it is happening right there, right then. Not 5 days before, not hours before, right then, right there. There was a lawyer on the panel who mentioned a bus 200, 300, 400, whatever it was, feet away. And he said, that is imminent. No, it's not, because there can be an intervening cause. Car accident. Imminent. Right away. So as the judge showed you, your verdict form will look a little like this. I couldn't fit in the initial line for the forward person in the date of crime, but this is what you'll get. This is something you'll get. And you're gonna have to make a decision here. Guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of manslaughter, or not guilty. Well, again, I've proven my case beyond a reasonable doubt. So you check off second-degree murder. And as we talked about already with the aggravation of a firearm, she did actually possess a firearm. She did discharge a firearm, and she did cause death. That's what your verdict form will look like, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, because there is only one verdict in this case that is consistent with the evidence, consistent with the facts of this case. And the only verdict that justice demands, and that's this defendant, Daisy Link, is guilty of second-degree murder. Thank you.
Thank you. And now for the defense?
Can we take a quick couple breaks starting this up?
Sure. Why don't we do this? Why don't we go to the jury room for a few minutes and we'll come back out and then we'll do the other closing.
All right, for the jurors, watch you step down. This jury room is different.
Mary's, did you give them the time that was used up? Did you tell the state how much time they used up? 50 what? 53, thanks. So we have 7 minutes, so we used up 53 minutes? Okay, that's fine, you're keeping time. All right, folks, we'll be back in a few minutes.
Bye.
Who offered? Did you figure out who ordered the chicken? to give them. They're identical copies. I like for them to have their own copies. Does anyone have an objection to them taking back their own personal copies of jury instructions? State, okay, so can I bring them back in? Yeah? All right, let's bring them back in.
All rise for the jurors.
All right, all 9 jurors are accounted present for. We can be seated. Everyone can be seated. Defense lawyers, state, defendant are present. Alrighty, folks. As I had before we go into Mr. Tomas's closing, page 9 of your instructions, we need to swap it out. There was a typo that I read the correct wording into the record, but because we're allowing you to take your own copies back with you, and I just want, so take out page 9, give it to Lisette. If you need a staple, I know this is getting very technical. If you need a staple or paper clip, let us know. All right, Lisette, here's. Lisette, see if they want a staple. You can give them paper clips too. No? We have paper clips up here too. Okay, so it looks like who has not swapped out page 9? All right. Everyone swapped out page 9. Thank you all for your continued attention. Now the defense will have an opportunity to give their closing argument.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, as you already know, Miss Link is presumed innocent. You are required to presume that she is innocent. And that presumption is to stay with you throughout this trial until you go back there and deliberate. And when you're back there deliberating, if you decide that the state has proven their case beyond all reasonable doubt, then that's another story. But she doesn't lose that presumption until you reach that decision, if you reach that decision. I don't know if you remember, because it's been a couple of weeks already, but during jury selection, there was a juror sitting in the back, in the corner, and we were talking about that example that I gave about the cat and the mouse, the hole in the box. You all remember that? Okay. There was this one juror who was sitting in the back, and he said, I can't make a decision because I don't have enough information. Well, as I explained to him, the cat is presumed innocent. You're not convinced that the cat's guilty, right? No, I haven't been convinced. Okay, well then, your decision is not guilty. He's presumed innocent, so your verdict, right? Your verdict is not guilty. If that changes, if you're convinced otherwise, then you change it. But if you're not, the verdict is not guilty. It's pretty simple. I would submit to you that right now, before I say another word, every single one of you should vote not guilty. I'll explain in a moment, but you should. because the state has not overcome a reasonable doubt in this case. Now remember, I will remind you, I don't have to prove that Ms. Link was justified in pulling the trigger. They have to prove that she was not justified, and they haven't. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that the state said a moment ago. They said a lot. They said that Daisy was upset because Pedro wasn't home. There's no evidence of that. They just made that up. There is no evidence of that whatsoever. Whatsoever. Point one witness, one piece of evidence that establishes that. You won't find it because it hasn't been introduced. It's their burden to prove it. They want to say something, they want to allege something, they have to prove it. They can't just get up here, say it, and say, oh, you got to believe us because we're the state. Believe everything we say, believe nothing that the defense say. We're the good guys. It doesn't work that way. They have to prove it. Daisy's mother flew in for a barbecue? That's what he said. You know that's not true. And they didn't even have that barbecue. And yes, they were going to have a barbecue the next day. You heard why. Number one, because she lives in Texas and she has other family that she doesn't get to see, so she's going to see them. And number two, they don't want to make it obvious that Daisy's leaving because they don't want Pedro to flip, which he did anyways. But they don't want him to flip, so they're doing it in a way that he won't find out. That was the testimony. Have they rebuffed that testimony? Have they proven that it's not true? No, they haven't. The most that they've done is, well, maybe it's true, maybe it wasn't. Have they disproven it? They have not. Can you point to a single piece of evidence, to testimony, to anything that rebuffs that? You cannot, because it doesn't exist. The state mentioned about phone calls between Pedro and Daisy. Pedro didn't have a phone because he tossed it after he almost beat Daisy to death a few days before. And then he had to get another phone, and you heard testimony about that. You heard testimony about that. When he went to his friend Kevin's house to do all that coke and to buy all that cocaine so he could have a party while he's driving a big rig across the state, snorting cocaine, he didn't have a phone. He didn't have a phone because he tossed the phone after he almost killed Daisy a few days before because he didn't want the police to track him.
Objection, back on evidence.
Overruled.
It wasn't evidence, she testified to it. I'm not making it up, I'm telling you what was in evidence. You can use your own recollection about what you heard, but we all know that that came out in evidence. I'm not making it up. The state has repeatedly said that was their home. No, it wasn't. They can't just say it and say, there, we proved it. They haven't proved it. This thing is really blurry. But for future reference, this is Defense Exhibit A. It is 3 pages long. Pedro Jimenez had 2 driver's licenses. These driver licenses, both of them, can't see it here, but you can see it yourself when you go through the evidence, both of them have his mother's address. You have seen lease agreements where he is not on the lease document. You have heard testimony from multiple people, including his son, that said he didn't live there. But most important, this is Exhibit F, Defense Exhibit F. This thing's horrible. You can look at it when you're deliberating. This is a court order. A court order. Now, the judge read the instructions, And I'm going to tell you exactly what the instruction that she read to you says. And I am talking about page 11 of the instructions which you will all have with you in the back. Parental rights. The court has taken judicial notice that there are no court records in Miami-Dade terminating the parental rights of Pedro Jimenez. That is right. During my opening statement, I told you he lost his parental rights. I didn't say terminated, I said lost. When your parental rights are terminated, that means it's terminated. That means there's no coming back. They're gone. When you lose your parental rights, you can get it back. And this order provides a pathway for Pedro Jimenez to get his rights back. You know what that pathway is? First page, bottom. Substance abuse assessment, individual therapy, parenting therapy, domestic violence. Domestic violence. September 20th, 2019. Ever since September 20th, 2019, that man was limited to seeing his children by court order 1 time a month under the supervision of his mother, who you've heard doesn't even live in this state. And you've heard no evidence or any indication that she ever came back, because she didn't. And he gets to have FaceTime calls with the children at the sole discretion of the mother. The sole discretion of the mother. Do you think courts and judges limit a parent's ability to see their children flippantly and for no reason? They did it because Pedro Jimenez was a drug addict, a cocaine abuser, an alcohol abuser, and a wife-girlfriend abuser. And, as you've heard throughout the course of this trial, he was doing nothing to get those rights back. He was doing the opposite. He was on his way to losing them permanently. Why? Because 5 days before he died, he beat Daisy Link halfway to death. Beat her halfway to death. Smashed her skull in. Did it in front of his 7-year-old son. Did it in front of his 5-year-old daughter. Did it in front of 4 other kids. 4 other kids who were present. The state got up here and told Pedro was not dangerous? Are you kidding me? Is that not the very definition of a dangerous man? He proved what he's capable of just 5 days before this happened. The state said a lot of things during their closing. I didn't agree with any of it except for 2 things. One thing that they acknowledged, Pedro was not a good guy. I agree. No, he wasn't a good guy. No, he was a cokehead, wife-beating lunatic. That's what he was. He terrorized and traumatized Daisy Link. He terrorized and traumatized his own children, and he terrorized and traumatized other children. This is a man that was capable of beating a woman halfway to death in front of children, in front of his own children. That's dangerous. Whether Daisy acted afraid of it or not doesn't change what he did. Whether Daisy made a flippant remark or made fun of him or insulted him doesn't change what he did. The state wants you to ignore and forget that he did that. Well, they can ask you to forget whatever, but you know what happened. This order Paragraph 3 of this order, Exhibit F, the minor children, Pedro Jimenez and Mia Jimenez, shall remain in the legal and physical custody of the mother, whose name is Daisy Link. Next paragraph. The non-custodial parent of Pedro Jimenez and Mia Jimenez is Pedro Jimenez. And then further down, Pedro Jimenez has not substantially complied with his case plan. A brief description of this plan is as follows: substance abuse treatment, assessment, individual therapy, parenting, domestic violence. He didn't do it then. He wasn't going to do it in 2022. And quite frankly, it's clear that he was never going to do it. He was less concerned with getting back his kids and having more time with his kids. He was more concerned with getting high and beating up Daisy Link. State will tell you that Pedro was broken, that Daisy did all these horrible things to you. They completely ignore what he did to her. And you can't ignore that because that goes to her state of mind. That goes to her state of mind right when she pulled the trigger. Yes, she went to pick him up, and I'll submit to you, that was a bad choice on her part. But you know what? Relationships are complicated. When two people love each other, even if it changes, it's complicated. When you add children to the mix, it's complicated. When you add property to the mix, it gets more complicated. When you add the fact that these kids, even though their dad's not a good guy, they love their dad. She knows that. So yes, she doesn't want to get him arrested. She doesn't want to get him deported. She doesn't want to do that. She just doesn't want to be with him anymore, and that's her right. And why would she want to be with him? He beats her up. He did so for almost the entire course of their relationship. And you need look no further than this order to know that. The state went on to say that Daisy Link picked up the casing, the spent casing in this case. There's no evidence of that, ladies and gentlemen. None whatsoever. They can say it till they're blue in the face. They have to prove it. It's their burden. And if they haven't proved it, which they haven't, then you can't accept it because it hasn't been proven. There's no evidence that she picked up any casing whatsoever. She was with police for almost an entire day from the point they got there at 3-something in the morning till she got to the station several hours later, till she started her 11-hour-long interrogation at what, 9? So she was done, what, the following evening? That's almost 24 hours. They had eyes on her the whole time. But they want you to believe that she found this casing and she got rid of it. Well, that doesn't jive with the evidence. There's no evidence of it. She told them where the gun was. She called 911. She tried to help this man as soon as she found him. And the only reason she didn't call 911 sooner is because Pedro stole her phone. The state said that the officers were kind to her. Are you kidding me? No, they weren't. They say that she threw a chair at Detective Morales. No, she didn't. There's no evidence of that. None whatsoever. There's 100 officers on there. All of them have body cams. Have you seen a single body cam of her throwing a chair at anybody? No, because she didn't. The state talked about Pedro Jr. They said one thing, and this is the other thing that I would agree with, that Pedro Jr. is a very smart boy. I agree, he is a very smart boy. Kids are honest. Yes, they are honest. And I would submit to you, Pedro Jr. was honest in his testimony. I specifically asked him, and he specifically said, I'm not telling you, nobody told me what to say. This is what I remember. Has he spoken to his grandmother in the last 3 years? Yes, because he lives with her. What's he supposed to do? What's he supposed to do? Because he speaks to his grandmother, therefore you shouldn't believe a word he says? You can judge that boy's credibility on your own. We have footage in this case which was deleted. It was lost while it was in police custody. The police only viewed one snippet, which is when Daisy Link went to Pedro while he was lying there. They didn't bother to look at anything else. They didn't bother to look at any other footage when he stole her purse or when he was running back and forth the 3, 4, 5 times that he was running back and forth, that Daisy's mother told him to leave, that Daisy told him to leave, or they threatened to call the police. There's none of that. It would have been on there, but they lost it. Nobody knows how. Everybody's saying, it wasn't me, I don't know, we did everything. It must have been the machine. It wasn't the machine. They gave the machine back to the owner, it worked fine. The only difference is a month's worth of footage is gone. I didn't delete it. The police did. The police lost it, the police destroyed it. What does that mean? They have it in their control and they lose it. That is incompetence of the highest order. This is a murder case. That is incompetence, ladies and gentlemen. You should consider that. We have a blood trail here, which begins in front of the house. The state will have you believe that at the time Pedro was shot, he was running away. He wasn't running away. He was running to the house. He was going to barricade himself inside that house where those kids were. He was going to keep her out, and he was going to do God knows what. I say God knows what because we already know what he did 5 days before. We already know that he snorted about a mountain of cocaine shortly before this happened. That was her home, which she has a right to defend. Pedro did not have an invitation or a right to be in that home. He made it clear that he was going to break into that home and lock her out and keep her away from her children, which he had no right to do. And importantly, she has every right to use deadly force to prevent him from doing that. And this is not just me talking, this is the law. This is the law, which I'm going to read to you in a moment. The law, I will remind you, that each and every one of you swore an oath to follow. Was Daisy honest with the police from the get-go? No, she wasn't. Okay? No, she wasn't. Should she have been? Probably. But can someone really understand what's going through somebody's mind when they're in that position? I think we can all agree that what happened to Daisy Link in the 5 days leading up to this incident was extraordinarily traumatic. Unless you've been through it, it's hard to imagine what that's like. I would say it's almost impossible to imagine what that's like unless you've actually experienced it. It's very easy to second guess and judge somebody for their actions when you don't know what was in their mind at the time they made it, ladies and gentlemen. As I told you before, relationships are complicated. How many times, how common is it to see a couple who clearly are wrong for each other, who clearly shouldn't be together, but for whatever reason they keep coming back to each other. They keep interacting. Maybe they separate, maybe they come back, maybe they go back. It happens. Well, that's because these things are complicated. There are children involved. There's a history involved. There's a familiarity involved. And yes, there's love involved. And that makes it very difficult. So it's very easy for us to say, you should have left. You shouldn't have called him back. You shouldn't have gone to pick him up. You should have called the police. You should have had him deported. You should have done all these things. I agree. She should have done all those things. They should have called the police. They should have done all these things differently. She didn't want to. Daisy told you why. Again, this is a court order. This court order says Pedro gets to see those kids once in person, see them in person, once a month, with the supervision of his mother. Daisy had a fear, a reasonable fear, that if the court found out that she was allowing Pedro to see those kids in person, knowing that he's still being violent, knowing that he's still abusing drugs, a court could very easily and theoretically say, you know what, you're not supposed to have him around those kids, you know what he's doing, we're going to take those kids away from you. As a parent, is there anything scarier? Anything scarier than losing your kids? I don't think so. If you can think something, I'd love to hear it. I can't think of anything. I'd rather be killed than lose my kids, personally. She feels the same way. That's why she did what she did. You can disagree with it. You can not like it. That's fine. That's your right. But that doesn't change the fact that at the time she pulled the trigger, she had every right to do so. This paper that you all have, jury instructions, this is the only law that applies in this case. There is no other law, no other instructions that apply to this case. You are to decide your verdict based on these instructions and these instructions alone. Okay? So let's go through the instructions. Page 3. This is a really loud one. I'm sorry, I can't have it. It's the best I can do, I'm sorry. Page 3. You all have it, so that helps. Justifiable homicide. Use of deadly force is justifiable if done while resisting an attempt to murder or commit a felony upon the defendant, in or upon any dwelling house which the defendant was at the time of the killing. Miss Link was at her home. She had every right to be there. Mr. Jimenez had no right to be there. I don't care if his kids were there. He had no right to be there. He had no right to see them. You saw the order. He did not live there. He did not have the keys. He was not on the lease. The address was not on his license. You've heard testimony from multiple people that he did not live there. You have not heard testimony from a single witness that said he lives there. They want you to believe he lives there because it's convenient for the case. They don't want you to believe that he didn't live there, which he didn't, because they know that if you know he didn't live there, they're done. Their case is over, and I'll explain that to you in a second. So the question is, has the state proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Pedro Jimenez lived in that house? No, they haven't. At best, maybe you can all say, yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. What are they pointing to prove that he lived there? Because there are some shoes and some shirts that appear to be for males in the house? Does that prove he lived there? I'm sorry, it doesn't. And use your common sense, people, okay? I still have stuff at my old house, and I've been divorced for 10 years. It's still there. It's not my house. I don't live there. I don't have a key. I can't go there and come and go as I please. No, I have to knock on the door. I have to be allowed inside like everybody else. Was that my house before? Sure. It's not anymore. Do I still pay the mortgage? Yeah, I do, actually. But I still don't have a right to go in there because it's not my house anymore. That was not Pedro's house. And unless they prove that it was his house and that he lived there beyond a reasonable doubt, then no. And as far as you're concerned, that was not his house. He didn't live there. He did not have a right to be there. Same page, page 3. Excusable homicide. The killing of a human being is excusable and therefore lawful. The killing is lawful, which means it's not illegal. It is lawful, not a crime. Under any one of these following circumstances, when the killing is committed by accident or misfortune, and doing any lawful act by any lawful means in the ordinary caution. Okay? Number 2, when the killing occurs by accident and misfortune in the heat of passion, upon sudden specific provocation. Can you see how that scenario could apply to this case? He's been asked to leave multiple times. You heard testimony from Daisy Link. Before she got the gun and fired, Mr. Jimenez grabbed her by her hair and threw her. And in grabbing her by her hair, he opened up the wounds that he created just days before. And he threw her to the ground. She's already told him to leave. She grabbed the gun. She told him, leave. And you heard what he said. I'm not leaving. I want to die. I'm ready to die. And then he ran to go break into the house. Then she fired. And then, and only then, when she fired, that's when he started running away. It took the shot. It took her firing the gun for him to abandon his intention to break into her house. And if you are stopping somebody from breaking into your house, that is justifiable use of deadly force. And it was going to happen imminently. We know that. We saw the blood trail. We heard the testimony. He was going to break into her house. She did everything she could to stop him. He refused. So she fired the gun. And it worked, because when she fired the gun, he ran off to the alley. I want to talk about the instruction for second-degree murder. This is on page 4. You see it there. Three elements that the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in order for you to be able to convict Daisy Link. And this is what your case is going to come down to. Number 2. The death was caused by the criminal act of the defendant. And number 3, there was an unlawful killing. So, I highlighted the relevant portions in 2 and 3, just to give you all a little guidance there. So, in order for you to convict her of anything, whether it's murder or manslaughter, of anything, you have to find that her firing that gun was a criminal act and that her killing Pedro was unlawful. So, in other words, what your deliberations are going to come down to is whether or not this killing was justified or not. Was Daisy justified in using deadly force or not? That's it. That's the decision you have to make, and that's going to be how you reach your verdict. Okay? It says it right there. So, let's fast forward. This is the key instruction in this case, ladies and gentlemen, page 8. It's the longest instruction out of all of them. It's, oh boy, look at that, it's 3 pages. It's 3 pages long. So, sorry, but we need to go there. Justifiable use of deadly force. 3rd paragraph, okay? Defendant does not have the burden of proving that she was justified in using deadly force. Instead, for you to find her guilty, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was not justified. This is what I said earlier. I don't have to prove that she was justified. It's the other way around. They have to prove she was not justified. So have they proven that she's not justified? Have they proven it beyond all reasonable doubt? Well, let's see. Let's have a look. Keep reading. The law on justifiable use of deadly force is as follows. Defendant is justified in using deadly force if she reasonably believed that such force was necessary to prevent the following: imminent death of great bodily harm to herself or another. So if she believes that imminently means it's about to happen, it's going to happen any moment, that she's going to get hurt or another person's going to get hurt, you have the right to use deadly force in that instance. Okay? And then there's another option. Or B, the imminent commission of burglary or false imprisonment against herself or another. At the time that she shot, Pedro Jimenez was running to break into her house, to barricade her out of her house. Okay? He had no right to be there. When you enter somebody's house without permission, that's burglary. I'm going to read you the definition of burglary in a moment. So that's number one. That's one felony that he was about to commit, which, according to this instruction, if she knows that he's about to commit a burglary upon her house, she has the right to shoot him, to stop him. This is the law that you are required to follow. In addition to burglary, false imprisonment. There are 2 kids in that house. Those kids are in her custody, not in Pedro's custody, her custody. By barricading himself inside the house, Pedro would be illegally separating those kids by force from their mother, without permission, without authority, without any right to do so. She has a right to use deadly force if she has reason to believe that that's about to happen. And we all know that that was about to happen. He was about to burglarize her home. He was about to lock her out of her home and commit false imprisonment upon her kids. So, moving on to the next part. This long paragraph here, right here on page 4, on page 8, this paragraph has to do with whether or not Daisy Link had a duty to retreat or not a duty to retreat. You can go through that and read it to yourself, but ladies and gentlemen, as you will see in a moment, she had no duty to retreat because she had every right to be there because that was her home. On the other hand, Pedro Jimenez had no right to be there because that was not his home. He had been told repeatedly to leave. He had been threatened that they would call the police. And he did leave, but he kept coming back. Multiple times, he kept coming back. He kept terrorizing this woman. She did it while her mother was there, and then he did it again after his mother left. His mother left at 1:32 in the morning, and he still came back after that. He's terrorizing her at 3 o'clock, 3-something in the morning. I'm going to refer you to page 8 at the bottom right here. If the defendant was in a dwelling or residence in which she had a right to be, which she did, she had no duty to retreat and had the right to stand her ground and use or threaten to use force, including deadly force, if she reasonably believed that such conduct was necessary to prevent death or great bodily harm to herself or another, or the imminent commission of a burglary or a false imprisonment against herself or another. So again, this says, again, if she has reason to believe, well, first of all, it says if she's in a place where she has a right to be, there's no question. She had every right to be there. That was her home. She's in a place where she has a right to be. She can use deadly force to stop somebody from burglarizing her home and to stop somebody from keeping her outside of the home and keeping her away from her kids who are inside the home. She had a right to use deadly force in each of those and in both of those. This is the law that you are required to follow. After this defines the crimes of burglary and false imprisonment. These are the two crimes that I would submit to you. The evidence has clearly demonstrated Pedro Jimenez was intent on doing and was in the process of doing, and the only reason he stopped from doing it is because she fired that shot. That was the only way that she was going to stop him from doing that, and we know that from Pedro Jimenez himself. I'm ready to die! What does that mean? I'm going to do what I want. You want to stop me? You're going to have to kill me. You're going to have to kill me. Burglary. Entering a dwelling owned by or in the possession of another, and at the time of entering the dwelling, the unauthorized person had the intent to commit the crime of false imprisonment. Please tell me, how has the state disproven that this was about to happen? Can you honestly say to me that the state has convinced you beyond all reasonable doubt that Pedro Jimenez was not in the process of rushing in to barricade himself inside that house and lock Daisy Lake out? Have they disproven that beyond a reasonable doubt? If the answer is no, then your verdict is not guilty. If the answer is yes, then okay, then I would ask you to ask yourself, how have they proven it? What have they shown? What have they introduced to prove that? I would submit to you they've introduced nothing to disprove that that man was going to do that. Certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt. That's burglary. False imprisonment, that's the next one. We're still on page 9, it's right here. False imprisonment is defined as follows: to forcibly or secretly confine or abduct another person without lawful authority to do so. Forcibly would apply here. He was attempting to forcibly confine those kids within that house and keep the mother out of the house. The next paragraph defines secretly. You're free to read that as much as you want, but secretly doesn't apply here, so I'm not concerned with that. The next paragraph is very important. Very important. Confinement of a child under the age of 13 is against the child's will if such confinement is without the consent of the child's parent or legal guardian. In other words, if you're locking two kids inside a house against the will of those kids' legal guardian, and those kids are under the age of 13, which, as you already know, those kids were ages 7 and 5 at the time, then that's false imprisonment. We know that Pedro was not their legal guardian, because that's what this order says. So unless the state is going to come up here and find a way to invalidate this court order, which if they have a way to do that, I'd love to hear it. They're not going to. This is a court order, this is a valid court order, and this court order was in place in full force on that night. Daisy Link asked him to leave. He did not respect her request to leave. He was going to commit false imprisonment. And that is what this instruction tells you. I'm going to keep reading. please bear with me, but again, this is a long instruction, but it is the most important instruction in this case, because this is what your deliberations are going to come down to. In deciding whether the defendant was justified in the use of deadly force, you must consider the circumstances at the time the force was used. The danger need not have been actual. I'll say that again. The danger need not have been actual. So it's actually legal to use deadly force against somebody, even if there's no real danger. The key is whether the person using the force reasonably believed that the danger was there. Now, I would submit to you, there's no question that the danger was real. There's no question that the danger was imminent. But this instruction shows you that even in cases where there's no real danger, if you find that the person who used deadly force had reason to believe that there was a danger, that's enough. That's enough to say that the use of deadly force was justified and lawful. I'll keep reading. To justify the use of deadly force, the appearance of imminent danger must have been so real that the defendant actually believed the use of deadly force was necessary. Pedro told her, "You're going to have to kill me, I'm ready to die." What else was she supposed to believe? What else was she supposed to believe? She didn't put herself in that situation. He put her in that situation. The state will tell you, oh no, she brought him to the house, so it's her fault. No. She brought him to the house. She knew she was going to leave. First of all, she was supposed to pick him up and take him to his mother's house, but she explained to you she came back because he still had his keys. She wanted him to see the kids. She wanted to make it work so that she could get away from this man finally, move away from him, not have to deal with him beating her up. And she was implementing her plan. Whether it was a good plan or not, that's up to you to decide. But that was her plan, that's what you heard. It has not been refuted by the state in any way, shape, or form. She went to pick him up. She came over. She came over while her mother was there, and you heard from her mother and you heard from her. He was obviously high on cocaine because he used a bunch of cocaine at his friend's house. He bought a bunch of cocaine from his friend. He was drinking. You heard what was in his system when he died. He was extremely under the influence of a ridiculous amount of cocaine. He was drunk. He was out of control. She brought him back, and as soon as he started becoming violent, which he did on multiple occasions, as you heard from her mother and from her, as soon as that happened, he was told to leave. He was told, 5 different times to leave? And 5 different times he left. 5 different times he came back. You saw video of him running around. There's a video of him being told to leave a few hours before he was shot. How many times does this woman have to tell him to leave? Once is enough. Once is all it takes. It's my house. You need to leave. You need to leave. If you don't leave, you're committing a crime by not leaving. Okay? You're committing a crime. But he knew that she didn't want to call the police on him. He knew that for whatever reason, and she shouldn't have, but for whatever reason, unfortunately, she had a soft spot for this man. And she kept giving him opportunity after opportunity, even though, as we all know, she probably shouldn't have. But again, relationships are complicated, and you can judge her all you want, you can disagree with her all you want, but you don't know what it was like for her. And that's the decision she made. And it's understandable because, again, relationships are complicated, and that's the position that she was in. But she didn't create this position. She asked him to leave. He put her in that position by coming back repeatedly. I'm at the bottom of page 9. The defendant is presumed to have held a reasonable fear of imminent peril of death or great bodily harm to herself or another when using defensive force that was intended or likely to cause death or great bodily harm to another, if, this is important, A, the person against whom the defensive force was used was in the process of unlawfully and forcefully entering or had unlawfully and forcefully entered a dwelling, residence, or occupied vehicle. This is black and white. There's no room for interpretation here. You are presumed to be in reasonable fear and justified to use deadly force if somebody is in the process of unlawfully and forcefully entering your home. That is exactly what he was doing. And unless they can prove to you beyond all reasonable doubt that that's not what he was doing, then your verdict is not guilty. Anything other than that would be a disgrace. And I know you all don't want to make a disgrace here. I think you all want to get it right. There's only one right answer here, okay? I'm confident that you're going to get the right answer. I want to go to the next page. The next paragraph B. Defendant knew or had reason to believe that an unlawful and forcible entry or unlawful and forcible act was occurring. This goes hand in hand with the previous one. Reason to believe it was occurring. He told her he was going to do it. He told her, you're going to have to kill me. And she saw him doing it. And the blood trail which begins in front of that front door corroborates what she told you. The state has given you nothing to dispute or disprove that. The next paragraph, this is page 10, right over here. The very next paragraph talks about situations where the presumption of reasonable fear does not apply. Okay? So, if any of these examples, there's 4 examples, if any of them were to apply, then you could come to the conclusion that, okay, well then this person didn't have a reason to believe that she was in danger of something bad happening to her. I'm going to start with the last one, with D, because this one's easy. The person against whom the defensive force is used is law enforcement. Look, Pedro Jimenez is not a law enforcement official, so we know D doesn't apply. So you can scratch out D. D is useless to you, okay? C, the person who uses defensive force is engaged in a criminal activity or is using the residence to further a criminal activity. This doesn't apply either. Daisy was not using her home to conduct a criminal activity, and she was not committing a crime when she was just at home in her front yard, minding her own business. So C does not apply. You can disregard C. B, the person or persons sought to be removed is a child or grandchild. Pedro Jimenez is a grown man. He's a grown man who's 6'4" and weighs 250 or 60 pounds, and he could easily beat the crap out of Daisy whenever he wants, and he has on multiple occasions. So B doesn't apply. So all that's left is A. So let's read A. The person against whom the defensive force is used has the right to be or is a lawful resident of the residence, such as an owner, lessee, or title holder. Has the state proven to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Pedro is a lawful resident, owner, lessee, or title holder? No. They got up here and they told you over and over it was his home, he lived there, they were a family. They can say it till they're blue in the face. They have to prove it. Have they proven it? No. The only proof you've received on that topic is that it wasn't his home. You have lease agreements that he's not on. You have his license that he's not on. You have testimony showing that the locks were changed. You have testimony that he lived at his mother's house. Would he go over there to see the kids? Yes, but that doesn't mean that he lived there. All the evidence that you've heard proves that he did not live there. At best, you can say, well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But if that's your conclusion, then it has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And again, the state has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. They have not done so. I want to focus on this paragraph, which is right after A, B, C, and D. A person who unlawfully and by force enters or attempts to enter another's residence is presumed to be doing so with the intent to commit an unlawful act involving force or violence. The fact that he was forcing his way into her house, according to this instruction, allows you to presume that he was doing so with the intent of committing a violent act and committing a crime, which is exactly what gives Daisy Link the right to use deadly force. And finally, and this is important, it's all important, but last paragraph, if you find that the defendant, who because of prior threats or difficulties with Pedro Jimenez had reasonable grounds to believe that she was in danger of death or great bodily harm at the hands of Pedro Jimenez, you may consider that fact in determining whether her actions were those of a reasonable person. They had prior difficulties. You know all about them. Isn't it reasonable for Daisy Link to fear that this man could hurt her, to fear that this man could kill her when he just did this to her a few days before? Yes, you can judge her for communicating with him and spending time with him in the intervening days, but as she said, number one, she loved him. That clouded her judgment. Number two, when he wasn't on drugs, there was no problem. The problem was when he was on drugs. And we know, without question, he was on a lot of drugs when she shot him. And what did she say? When he's on drugs, when he's on cocaine, he's a monster. And that's what he is. That's what he is. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning, top of page 11, in considering the issue of self-defense or defense of another, you may take into account the relative physical abilities and capacities of the defendant and Pedro Jimenez. Pedro Jimenez is a man, Daisy Link is a woman. Daisy Link's not a petite woman, she's a larger woman, but Pedro Jimenez was a lot bigger than her, a lot stronger than her, a lot more dangerous than her, and he's proven that he could hurt her, and he did hurt her over and over and over again. You may not like her, you may disagree with her, you may think whatever you want to think. You may take exception to what she said on that video. You may do all that. But none of that changes the fact that at the time she fired that shot, that man was going to barricade himself inside that house. And according to the law which you all swore you would follow, she was justified in using deadly force.
Mr. Octava, can you go help him? It's your computer.
Can we stop the clock for this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
This is minutes before he gets shot. wandering around. It's 3-something in the morning. He's still wandering around, walking around aimlessly, thinking about how he's going to terrorize Daisy next, which he's been doing all day. Walking around. He's been told to leave 5 times. He's back again. You think he's back again for a good reason? You think he's back again to do something nice? You think he's back again to make up? No, he's back again to cause trouble. Does that sound like somebody who's in fear? No, that sounds like somebody who's coked out of his mind, somebody who likes to beat women up, somebody who likes to terrorize women, and somebody who's going to break into his ex-girlfriend's house because he can. Daisy Link is not guilty. Find her not guilty. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, state your rebuttal. Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is the last time I'm going to talk to you. I'm sure you're as sick of my voice as I am at this point. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but there's a couple of points that I want to touch on about what the defense just mentioned. He said that the officers were rude, disrespectful, and mean. That's actually not what Daisy said yesterday on the stand. She even mentioned that they let her go to the bathroom at her house. They spoke to her. She even said to Officer Edwards, nobody would have done this to him. I don't know who would. Except on cross-examination, what she said was, I shouldn't have, because she knew she had other options. She knew if we take her at her word, and I think we can all agree there is absolutely zero reason to take her at her word at this point, lie after lie after lie. This happened 5 days ago. She says she spoke to the police. Maybe, maybe not. Lie after lie after lie. She shouldn't have. If that's true, despite the fact that on her phone, those videos conveniently aren't there, call the cops. Tell them. Let them know. Take your kids and flee. Your kids, your children, your 8-year-old and your 5-year-old, take them. Get them away from that dangerous man. That's what she wants you to believe. Instead, though, what does she do? According to her, he leaves. She goes in her car, goes back home, takes a nap. Day later, day after that, Pedro comes over. They sleep together. They mentioned that, I mentioned on my closing argument that I said that the defendant was upset that the victim wasn't home. They said that's not true, there's no evidence of that. That's actually not true. She says at some point in her statement, I don't have the timestamp, but she says in her statement, it's not fair. I told my mom it's not fair. He's always on the run, he's never home. She says directly to the officers, it's not fair, I'm upset. Almost beaten to death. These are horrible. Horrible. But as we heard, Daisy admitted she herself is an abuser. These are horrible, but these happened 5 days before. Was it going through her mind when she invited him over the day after, or the day after that? Was it going through her mind when she picked him up from a friend's house? It wasn't. She had forgotten about this. She even said it on the stand yesterday. How do we know it was their home? Well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Daisy Link told us it was yesterday. She said Pedro never had a key, except on cross, she said, well, actually, he may have. When he left, he probably had a key to my house. They lived together, how do we know? Well, here's the thing. On Pedro's address, it has a certain, on his license, it has a certain address on it. But what else? It has that address on it, mail that was found in a car, with Daisy Link's name on it as well. They lived together. But you don't have to take the evidence like that. Pedro Jr. said the same thing. He said, my dad lives in my car, or his car, because he's a trucker, he's never home. So, when he's home, he lives here. Sleeps on the couch sometimes, sure. But this is his home. He said that as much. The court order, I'm sorry, the court order, this is what they thought of it. They thought it was trash. That's what they did with it. They threw it on the ground, they didn't care about it. How do we know that? It's on video. She's giving him more than what this says. This, to them, was trash. There is no termination of parental rights. They ignored it over and over and over again. The pistol whipping episode from 5 days ago, if you take her at her word, and you shouldn't, there is no reason to take Daisy Link at her word. If you take her at her word, it happened 5 days before. And then they slept together. And then she picked him up. And the interesting thing there about picking him up from a friend's house is she says it's a drug den. There's prostitutes, there's drugs throughout. He's a monster on drugs. Well, we have it on video of them actually arriving back from that house. You tell me if that looks like an angry, aggressive man playing with his children. Apparently high on cocaine, according to Daisy at that point. A monster is what she said. Except she let that monster hang around her children. Play with them. Be around the house. The video that was destroyed, it wasn't some cover-up, it wasn't conspiracy. They actually explained explicitly how. Sergeant Fernandez came in and explained she was called out on scene, plugged in a hard drive. It wasn't working, so what do? They have to take it back to headquarters. There is a specific program that they use, and she explained, if they run that program on that hard drive and plug it back in, it will delete everything. It will reset the hard drive. And so what do? They attempt and attempt and attempt to get that video, but they can't. And they give up. And so they return it back to the homeowner, who then plugs it back in. It's a full hard drive. It got reset. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, Daisy Link's story doesn't make any sense. And the reason it doesn't make any sense is because of the gunshot and how it traveled. Because what she says is, he was charging at me, and I fired. The only way this gunshot, this trajectory, makes any sense at all is if he is running away. That upwards trajectory, through the foot, in and in, through the thigh, in and out, clean as day, is if his back is turned and he is actually running away. Otherwise, you'd have an injury that way, to the front of his body. That's not what happened here.
30 more seconds.
We know what happened here. We know that Daisy Link purposely discharged that firearm at Pedro Jimenez as he fled her. The state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that she is guilty of second-degree murder, and you should find her guilty as such. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm on page 19. In just a few moments, you will be taken to the jury room by the bailiff. The first thing you should do is choose a foreperson who will preside over your deliberations. The foreperson should see to it that your discussions are carried on in an organized way and that everyone has a fair chance to be heard. It is also the foreperson's job to sign and date the verdict form when you all have agreed on a verdict and to bring the verdict form back to the courtroom when you return. During deliberations, jurors must communicate about the case only with one another and only when all jurors are present in the jury room. If a juror goes to the restroom, the deliberations should stop until the juror returns. You are not to communicate with any other person outside the jury room about this case. Until you have reached a verdict, you must not talk about this case in person or through the telephone, writing, or electronic communication, such as an email or any other means. Do not contact anyone to assist you during the deliberations. These communications rules apply until I discharge you at the end of the case. If you become aware of any violation of these instructions or any other instruction I have given you in this case, you must tell me, the bailiff. Many of you have cell phones, tablets, laptops, or other electronic devices here in the courtroom. The rules do not allow you to bring your phones or any of those types of electronic devices into the jury room. Kindly leave those devices at your seats where they will be guarded by the bailiff while you deliberate. You can send a note or a phone call to your loved ones letting them know you're deliberating before Umberto takes those electronic devices. If you need to communicate with me, so from this point on, if you're going to communicate with me, send a note through the bailiff. If you have voted, do not disclose the actual vote in the note. If you have a question, I will talk with the lawyers before I answer, so it may take some time. You may continue your deliberations while you wait for my answer. I will answer any questions if I can in writing or orally here in open court. During trial, items were received into evidence as exhibits. You may examine whatever exhibits you think will help you in your deliberations. These exhibits will be sent into the jury room with you when you begin to deliberate. If there's something missing, send a note, or we'll try to communicate with you if there's anything that we needed to keep back with us. If you need extra copies of anything, such as the transcripts, let us know. I can make 6 copies for you all. In closing, let me remind you that it is important that you follow the law spelled out in these instructions in deciding your verdict. There are no other laws that apply to this case. Even if you do not like the laws that must be applied, you must use them. For more than 2 centuries, we have lived by the Constitution and the law. No juror has the right to violate the rules we share. You can keep those copies with you. One of them has to be signed and submitted by me to the clerk. I have 3 jurors, so I know that you all have been very dedicated. We can hear you laughing, so I think you all have become close since then. That's a good thing. But there's 3 dedicated jurors that will be leaving us. So you're going to go with Umberto up to my office. We have lunch for you. I'll shake your hand and thank you. It is Grace Rivas, Liseth Del Carmen Meza, and Crystal Martinez. So just keep all your stuff with you. Follow Umberto and Lisette up to the 4th floor. And then you all can go into the jury room now.
All right, to the jury.
Yeah. If you want, take your time, send the message. Umberto will collect your electronic devices. Thank you. All right, jurors have left. Lawyers, please take a look at the exhibits. If there's a clean laptop, I'd like to send that back to them.
Judge, can I
That's
just
the
wanted
verdict
to
form.
fill those both real quick?
Oh, sure.
I'll clean up my mess.
All right, we can go off record. When Mr. Tomas comes back, we'll discuss.